Hey guys, welcome to the Editing Bar, the channel that brings you writing tips that make sense. I am super excited today. Like I said, the last couple of times I've been on an interview kick with some of my favorite authors that I've worked with in the past. And today is no different. This is one of my former students through Creator Institute and New Degree Press that I freelance with. And we're talking about her book, and it's very apt for the kind of current climate and environment that we are all living in right now. So I am going to turn it over to her to introduce herself and her book. Take it away.
Hi, Stephen. Nice to see everyone today. I am Jen Hale, and I am the author of Have a Good Mourning. Isn't it beautiful? Little coffee cup. So I wrote this book over the past year. Its primary focus is mourning with joy. I lost my mother in April of 2018 to cancer. It was a very short battle. She was diagnosed in January and passed away in April. I felt like I did not want to continue feeling just horrible every day and depressed and sad. So I tried to pull myself out of this funk and just realize that I really want to be able to experience her in my life, but be able to mourn her loss with joy. And so I went on this path the past year, interviewing some incredible people and talking about their stories in this book. It was mainly just as a way to inspire me, to learn from some people who've blazed this trail before, and be able to gather as many ideas as I can from other people. Because I've learned that we cannot change our circumstances. No matter how sad I am or how much I cry for my mother, it's not going to bring her back. So I thought, why not take this time, to reconnect with her, reconnect with me, and do it with joy. So that's pretty much what, the premise of the book is.
Yeah, I love that, because I remember when you and I first met, and we were kind of going over the book together and kind of dissecting a little bit of like what the dream for the book was. It was and still is to me such a different perspective than what most grief books or grieving books or books on mourning actually address. They don't talk about having joy. They just kind of talking about not having it be quite so depressing. And I really appreciated that about your book. That sense of like, just because we are in mourning doesn't mean that we can't still have joy and live life. So when you were getting ready to sit down and write the book, like what were some of the things that you wanted to try and convey, and like what did that kind of initial concept look like when you were just starting off?
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, I didn't have this. I knew I wanted to talk about joy, but not in a sense of like, oh, I'm over my mother's loss. I will never be over my mom's loss. Like, I will continue to mourn her until I die. But I just wanted to be able to exert and use the energy that I was feeling inside, and put it to good use. I felt all these feelings inside of hurt and sadness, but I wanted to be able to turn them into something good. And I wanted to be able to show people how to do that with, applicable strategies. It's easy to talk about it, but I wanted to actually give them concrete examples, not only from my life and stories of inspiration that my mother gave me, but I also wanted to include other people's stories, in this book as well. And so I took each of the letters, have a good morning, and applied, a specific strategy, like a specific strategy sounds kind of scientific, but like a just a way of being, So for instance, like H, I chose happiness. And even though that sounds really simple on the surface, it's a very hard, concept to grasp and to attain when you've lost someone.
Yeah.
So, I incorporated my story actually of shortly after my mother died, I visited this nearby farm and I saw this woman feeding goats. And I just asked her, like, how do you do that? Like, I want to do that. And she put me in touch with this farmer. His name's Roy. And a couple weeks later, I get this text message from this random number that said, sheep or pigs. And I could only assume it was him. So I said, sheep? Question mark. He's like, okay, I'll put you on the sheep squad. So ever since I reached out to her and to the farmer, I was feeding sheep, and I talk about how much these sheep have brought me joy. I look forward to feeding them every Friday, and it's very odd, but I probably would have never found these sheep if I wasn't open to trying to find happiness. After my mother's loss, and it's really spawned into this beautiful relationship, not with sheep, but with the people on the farm. And, I look forward to talking with them every week and feeding the sheep.
That was probably one of my all-time favorite stories that came when I was working with you, because it was so unconventional. And that's actually one of the things that I appreciated about the book, especially when you broke it down into those more bite-sized examples, is that you actually give concrete examples. It's not just these arbitrary ideas, do your thing, find you. It's like, okay, that's cool, but when if you're connected with somebody, that part of you is no longer there in the same way. And so because and I remember you talking about how it reminds you of your mom because she was so nurturing to you, and and that is how you kind of reflect your mom and honor her memory, is by being nurturing to the sheep. And and every now and then, like when you on Facebook, when you post the picture like the sheep butts and stuff, and I'm just I just crack up because I think people need that kind of that laughter, that ability to go, you know what? Yeah, like I can still be happy, and actually that is going to be more honoring to them if I'm just sad and depressed, which not everyone stays there, but and you address that in the book too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I never in a million years thought, feeding a couple sheep on a Friday would bring me so much joy. And yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I thought when I lost my mother, I wanted to try to find, excuse me, some type of motherly figure that, could continue to nurture me. And but I found that most of the healing is me doing the healing, excuse me, nurturing myself. I found more growth opportunities from that than, looking to someone else. Because in all honesty, I mean, my mother can never be replaced. I mean, yeah, I can look to, motherly figures, but it's up to me now. It's kind of like she passed the baton to me to, do the nurturing to other people, which I find very healing. Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those who are watching now and later on, what was the process of writing the book actually like? because we all know that writing a book is incredibly difficult. But like, what was your experience with it, just kind of over the course of the whole process?
Sure. So a year ago, I talked to Eric, who is the director of the program, and I was so impressed with him, and I gave him kind of like a very small idea, like not fleshed out at all, and he said the only thing you have to do is just interview a bunch of people. That was like the first part of it. And I really have not had any interview experience. So that was a little daunting, but I took it on and started interviewing people. I really didn't know what I was asking them. I knew it was going to be about mourning a loss, but I didn't really know. So I just started interviewing a ton of people. And that, I got into my groove and got, I wouldn't say good at it, but I got more comfortable at it. So I interviewed probably 24 people. And then I was assigned this wonderful person, Stephen Howard, to be my developmental editor. And not to get too hokey or anything, but I really feel like we were meant to work together. I felt very comfortable with you initially. I feel like we hit it off, and oftentimes, you just really helped keep me on track, but not in a way of like, oh, you have to write all this stuff. Like, you were so gracious with me. And oftentimes when I wanted to quit so much because I felt like I didn't know what I was writing. Like, for me, I'm a control freak, and I want to be able to see, where I'm going. But honestly, I was just writing stuff, and it was so haphazard that, I couldn't see the finish line. But, I'm so grateful to you we talked about the people I interviewed and how to frame them in stories. And you looked at what I call chicken scratch. Like, I don't even know what I was writing, but I was so grateful to you because, that was what was so powerful in the program. They want you to just not be afraid to write and not put too much pressure on yourself in the first portion of the program, which I think was really important, because if they, put such stringent deadlines on things and, specific word count that you had to reach, that would have been so overwhelming, because I didn't know what I was really writing. But then, the evolution of this process was, looking back, it really does work well, because, you're kind of putting your feelers out in the beginning. You're assigned a developmental editor you work with for a few months, and then you submit, what they call a first draft. And even though I did have a book when I submitted the first draft in October, I realized like how much more it could be improved upon. So after I submitted in October, I waited for Eric and his team to review it. And, even though they were very kind and said, there's a lot of potential here, I needed to put in a lot of more work. I realized that it needed a lot more, elbow grease. And so I ended up pretty much rewriting the whole book. And I know how daunting that sounds, and it was. But I already had, the outline. I knew what I wanted to say, and it was just a matter of just making the points clearer. And in this draft, I was able to really include stories about my mom that I didn't really include in the first draft, which, was really important to me, to be able to share her with the world in this book. So that was really awesome. But after I had submitted the first draft, I ended up working with a marketing editor, and she helped me try to promote the book, and which is very difficult for me. I'm not a very good self-promoter, so it was very difficult. But I was pleasantly surprised that I got a lot of support from my friends on Facebook, and friends and family, and it was very it is pretty remarkable how I was able to write this book in a year. And I cannot forget my dear friend Natalie Sanchez, who was just an unbelievable angel throughout this entire process. She actually, Stephen had introduced me to her because he also was her developmental editor, and he said, I think you should meet Natalie Sanchez because her book is very similar to yours, and I think you're going through similar things. She lost her dad, you lost your mom. I think you should talk. And honestly, after the first conversation I had with her, it was just like, oh my gosh, where has this girl been my whole life? I'm like 12 years her senior, but I felt so connected with her. I mean, she's such a wise, like beautiful soul. And, we connected right away. And just being able to talk with her throughout this process and, complain and, together, we would be like, oh, I don't want to do this. And but we would push each other through it. And we did. And, and just being able to come out with, such wonderful friends like you, Stephen. I will always consider you a dear friend of mine for everything I put you through. And, it really is, looking back, like when you're in the thick of it, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't imagine doing this again. But, I think it's a wonderful program. And I even though I cursed it sometimes because, writing a book is not easy. And this book isn't like how to trim bushes either. I mean, it's like a very deep emotional topic, brought up a lot of emotion. But being able to have that like foundation in place of, having people assigned to you and meeting people, and it was a wonderful experience.
Yeah, I mean, it was fun for me because I was like low key lurking now and then because I would still see the chat notifications kind of come up now and then, and then there were several times where you had reached out to me on Facebook, and you're just like, I'm done. I don't want to do it no more.
Oh yeah.
Like, you came to the wrong person if you if you were looking for permission to quit. But yeah, I think it was so cool to see the growth in you as an author over the process from my perspective, because what looked like chicken scratch to you, what kind of all made sense to me and what it was that you were writing, because there were parts of it where it's like, okay, this is cathartic writing, this is stuff that's for you. And then but especially when you did you came up with that concept of the have a good morning and breaking down each one of those things. I mean, that really brought a big portion of that book together in a really fantastic way.
Thank you.
And I think that one of the other questions that I think everyone should hear is, what were some of the like for instance, like the difference between grief and mourning, right? That was something that you and I had talked about very briefly during our time together, because I didn't realize that there was actually a difference between the two. And the difference between grief and mourning is really where this book kind of separates itself from all of the other books out there, because it actually addresses each rather than it as one thing. So what definitions do you kind of point out? What differences do you point out in the book between those?
Yeah, that's a great question. So obviously, grief and mourning are two different things. I mean, they're two different words, but they're definitely used interchangeably all the time in our lexicon, And it just didn't occur to me until, I did my research that grief is what we feel on the inside. Like grief is like the emotions that we feel, sadness and longing and yearning for our lost loved one. But mourning is actually what we put out, in the world, like how we, um, it's essentially just action, like how we mourn outwardly, how we show those emotions outwardly. And I took it as like feelings, and just mourning for me was just action. Like, what are you going to do to take those feelings of grief and sadness and show them outwardly to the world, but not in a, look at me kind of sense, but like, how are you going to take those emotions and out of your heart and put them out in the world in order to not only heal and transform yourself, but you don't know how many lives you're going to touch by doing so. I early on in my journey, after I lost my mother, I was, grief stricken. I was stuck in like this grief, what I like to call a grief trap. I just, day in and day out, I was feeling horrible and sad. And I was just like, didn't want to do it anymore. I'm like, is this how my life is going to be for the rest of my life? So that's when I had this epiphany of, what can I do today to make a difference in my life, for myself? And, that's when I realized, like, oh my gosh, I've been grieving so deeply that I haven't been mourning, which I think is where a lot of the healing comes from, because you put a lot of those emotions into action, and you not only learn about yourself, but you learn like how you deal with tragedy and how you want to deal with tragedy in the future. But I mean, I'm not condemning grieving, because I think grieving, I mean, I also learned not too long ago that you can be grieving and mourning at the same time.
Hmm.
I'm still grieving my mother, but I take time to sit with that sadness, but I also don't allow myself to sit with it too long, where can become debilitating, because it can be. Um,
Yeah.
so, I think you have to have grace with yourself, but realize, I mean, you know yourself the best. If you're, sitting in your home day in and day out and not doing certain things and just feeling ultra sad, even just going outside to take a walk, can make a world of difference. Like taking like these baby steps into, your healing process, can make a huge difference. So,
Absolutely. And I think that 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 distinction that you make, that grief is something that we feel on the inside and mourning is kind of what we outwardly show people, um is almost taboo in many respects, where it's like you're kind of expected not to mourn. You're just kind of expected to grieve on your own and not show anything,
mhm,
because it makes other people feel uncomfortable sometimes when you mourn outwardly.
definitely.
And I think that that's one of the reasons why I found it so insightful when I was reading that kind of first draft, was that I had never actually considered the differences between the two. And I know at one point, you and I had done an interview, and I was sharing the story of our miscarriage and stuff. And it wasn't until I had actually mourned and I was actually able to let it out that the healing was able to actually come in. But I had never really kind of realized the distinction between the two until I had read that portion of the book at that
Mhm.
point in time. And I was like, huh. It
Mhm.
had never occurred to me that way. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I just don't think a lot of people realize the importance of having that outward. And it doesn't mean that it's going to be weeping and sorrowful. There are times for that, obviously. um
Mhm.
but you mourned by, you know feeding sheep and finding a different, you found an outlet for it. That was a healthy outlet that allowed you to mourn in a way that honored your mom.
Hmm.
And I think that again is kind of where the distinction is between what sets your book apart from a lot of the other books out there on this subject, is that it's like you can do something and mourn and still find joy. And that's not something that we see a lot nowadays.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I found early on that um, I wanted to use these emotions in, just like a positive way. I mean, but my way isn't always right. It's just a matter of, I mean, I might feed sheep, but someone might find that they, like to, feed birds every morning peanuts or something. I mean, it doesn't have to be, it's just, I wanted to give people ideas that to look into their own lives to find, what brings them joy. And I mean, that's just one example. I mean, there's so many other examples of in the book. Each letter has its own, strategy and story. So, but yeah, I mean, I know that I make people feel uncomfortable when I talk about my mom. But I don't care. I'm not doing it to please other people. And I want to make that distinction. Mourning is not about like, look at me and what I'm doing. And it's about like what works for you. Like just because we're showing it outwardly doesn't mean we have to have an audience. You know,
Right.
I don't need, I mean, only so many people know that I feed sheep every Friday, you know, and they know that I like to do it, in memory of my mom and just doing something out of my comfort zone. But, I don't do it and, you know, want to I'm not seeking praise for it. It's more of, I just doing things that you might not have done before that you can feel more connected to the woman, the person you lost. I mean, that's, what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you think it has, like over the course of the process, rewriting the book, what was one of your favorite stories that you got to share in the book?
Hmm, it's a good question. So, so I met this guy, or I didn't meet him. I talked to him. His name is Michael, and Michael Tessalona, and he um, shared about his sister who he lost shortly before Thanksgiving, probably 5 years ago, in a terrible, tragic car accident. It was completely unexpected, and I was so moved by his story because at her wake, he told me that he looked, was praying over her, and her name was Nina. Nina, please, I don't want this to be the end. Like, if you can, like, please show me you're around me, in some way. And, and he felt like it wasn't the end for him. And, a few days later, he and his family, they go see a movie on Black Friday. And he told me the story of, being in the movie theater lobby and seeing this woman who was so uncannily similar to his sister. Like he could not take his eyes off of her. She looked like her, and he was just like dumbfounded. And obviously it wasn't her, but he was open to the idea of seeing her again. And just like gave me goosebumps to be able to hear this story because it made me realize, like, wow, like, could I see my mom again, in different ways? And the answer is yes. I've seen my mother in so many different ways, in a cardinal flying by, like it's just like this instant feeling like she's near. Or she used to drive a gold Honda Accord, and I see that car everywhere. But not in like a, oh, I'm like looking for it. Like it'll literally be like go right in front of me. And like I know that sounds strange, but I feel like she's nearby when that happens. And probably the most fun experience I've had being able to see my mom was I was in Chicago in September of last year, and I went to the Field Museum, and when I walked in, I saw all these display signs that said the Sue experience, and my mother's name was Sue. I'm like, the Sue experience? What in the heck is this? So of course, I go up to the person at the counter. I said, "What is this?" And she's like, "Oh, it's actually a T-Rex named Sue." It was named after the woman who discovered it in the Hell Creek Basin in South Dakota in 1990. Her name is Sue, I think, Hendrickson. And I'm like, what? This, like, it could have been any other name. It could have been the Charlie experience or the Stewart, but it's the Sue experience of all names. And I was there, and it's just, I mean, that, and of course, like, I was in awe of this dinosaur. I mean, its name was Sue. And anyway, I mean, it's just, just hearing his story, and just being open to the idea of seeing her, even if it's in just such a small way, it gave me so much joy. I mean, now I have like sweaters with dinosaurs that say Sue on them, and mugs, and things that have cardinals in my home. And but they, every time I see it, it makes me happy. I mean, there's so many wonderful stories that I captured in the book, but that one in particular, just, it gave me so much hope too, that I can be able to see my mom, still, and feel her presence, and as something as small as a cardinal, and as something as big as a Tyrannosaurus Rex. So, and I get excited to see, like, oh, and I use Michael's strategy, like, Mom, if you can, like, show me yourself today. Like, I would love to see you in some way, and it's been a beautiful experience. So,
Yeah, I remember that story, and I it is one of my favorite ones. It reminds me a lot of my mom. She lost, so my grandma, her mom passed away very suddenly back in 2004, and she loved owls and hummingbirds and the beach and all that kind of stuff. And so now, anytime that my mom sees a hummingbird, it instantly reminds her of my nanny. And it's those little things where, it's just those little reminders that just they keep you going. And yeah, they make you happy. They fill you with that
mhm,
joy, because it's just that little reminder that they're still there. I love that.
absolutely.
So I do want to take a moment to let everybody know that down in the show notes is the link to Jen's book, Have a Good Morning, and I cannot recommend it enough. Even if you have not been one to experience the loss of a loved one at this point, you're going to know somebody who has, especially with everything that has been going on lately in the world. We're all going to know at least one person who has lost somebody. And so, even if it's not you, Jen's book does a phenomenal job of helping equip you um, to help others and help support others, to empathize with others. So I highly recommend that you go down and get their book, get her book. If not for yourself, for the people that you know, read the book for them, and then maybe gift it to them, because they may need it at some point. So I would highly recommend doing that. And then Jen, you're also on Facebook, if I remember.
Mhm.
And I forgot to put the link to your Facebook page um, in the show notes, so I'll make sure to do that at the end. So that way, but if you guys, I recommend following her. And she posts pictures and some videos now and then, just encouraging people kind of during their time of loss, with her own personal stories and stories of others. So highly recommend that you guys connect with her on that. So I think the other thing that comes to mind is like, okay, you've finished a book, you've gone through the editing process, you rewrote the whole thing in 3 months, which is incredibly impressive because you had quite a bit there when you and I left off. Um,
Yeah, it was a daunting. It was, but yeah, I'm a perfectionist, so knowing that it was printed, I felt like I would have been mad at myself if I didn't take that time, to really make sure I said what I wanted to say, but do it in a way that people can use it in their own lives. I felt like I had to do it as my duty.
yeah, yeah. And then there was the whole kind of beta process, and you were sharing chapters of the new thing. We got to vote on the cover for the book, which I love the cover for your book.
Thank
Uh,
you.
it just, the color, the little cup of coffee smiling at you, like it made me just so happy just seeing.
I'm glad. Thank you. Yeah, I initially, and I don't know if you can see it, but the picture behind me is a portrait of my mother when she was young. And it was done by a dear friend of mine, Bobby Marcy, who I met in Chicago when we were doing a century bike ride. He was doing it in memory of his friend Barbara. I was doing it in memory of my mother. And, it was a 100-mile ride, and, we got to know each other quite well. And he told me he painted, and I was like, oh my gosh, I want you to paint a picture of my mother. And initially, I wanted that to be the cover, but it didn't translate the message that I wanted to. I really wanted this coffee mug, to just be just really happy, and but not too happy, but just like a little tiny smile that you can find, joy in when you're in mourning. But I did manage to use it on the back, which I think really it looks nice on the back, and I wanted to give him credit for that. But yeah, thank you. I'm really pleased with how it turned out. Like I initially had this kind of wacky idea of using a like a breakfast smile, with like eggs as the eyes and like bacon, but it felt too it just didn't translate, and I mean, it was a cool, like because with mourning and I talk about, having a good mourning, like an actual mourning, and how important that is as well. In the book, but it just didn't work out. But yeah, the designers with New Degree Press, I was very impressed with, and and even though this is a very simple concept, I think just with the coloring and the the fonts he used, like I was impressed with how he helped me, capture the idea, and yeah,
Yeah,
I made
absolutely.
you happy.
Yeah, yeah. I when the message went out, and it had all of the different color schemes and all that to choose from.
Which
As
one did
soon as
you vote for?
that one,
Did you? The
yeah,
orange?
every single time.
The orange one though?
Yeah.
Really? Wow.
Yep.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
I was just like the orange. It's bright. Orange makes people feel happy.
Yes.
And the simplicity of the coffee cup with the smile there was, I was just like, that is Jen's book. Like, that is it. And then I was just keeping
Aw.
my fingers crossed the rest of the time. I'm like, please, 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 please.
Yes, I know. I had a really beautiful like magenta color, and then I also had this really beautiful blue. But people were like, "Oh, the pink is like for girls, and blue is for guys." And for me, blue is a kind of a sad color. You know, it's like a cool color, and I think that this orange, just like you said, is so happy, and it represents mourning, like an actual mourning. Having like
Yeah.
the great sun come up and. But yeah, I'm very pleased with it too. So I'm glad you like it.
Yeah, I was so stoked. And it's funny that people were more like the pink versus blue. I was like, it's funny to me because I'm like, I wasn't even thinking about that. I was thinking the pink just looks too bright, and
Yeah.
blue just makes me think, because blue is typically associated with sadness or
Yeah.
that kind of
Same.
stuff.
Yeah.
I was
Like
like,
crying. Yeah.
that's the opposite of what you're going for with the
Yeah.
book.
Exactly. Yeah.
So now that the book is out, it's published, and you have the physical copy in your hands. What did it feel like? Because I actually missed the unveiling and the opening, but what was it like when you opened the box and you were like, holy crap, this is my book?
Well, yeah, I opened it on my mother's second death anniversary. I had a Facebook Live event, which I've never done before, and I had terrible, I had terrible time with, sound and everything. But I mean, just like that moment of opening it up and like looking at it, because I hadn't looked at it before. I waited for that moment, and just being able to hold it in my hands and having it. I mean, this is like a real book. I don't know. I never thought it would actually feel and look like a real. I don't know. That sounds like a weird thing to say, but it's so surreal to actually see it in flesh. In the pages and it. I don't know. I mean, it was a very overwhelming moment just because I had people staring at me and looking at me and being there to celebrate with me. But it was very surreal. It still is. I still look at it like, who wrote that book? Oh, I wrote that book. It's just weird. It's weird, but it's a good weird. It's a good weird.
Yeah. And so what plans do you have, or have you thought about doing now that the book is actually published? Like, do you have anything? Because I know that the book launch party that was supposed to be like in person kind of thing kind of got delayed because of everything happening. But like, what plans do you have now for the book?
So for the book, my goal is actually to launch some type of podcast. I actually have 2 episodes already recorded, which I'm very excited about. I just want to continue to be inspired by people and their stories, and I think it's a great extension of the book. I think there are so many people who have stories about how they've taken the death in their life and really used it as a way to like transform their lives in some way. I have a dear friend, Ashley, I met a few years ago, and she and I connected. Her father died, and she looked at her life and was like, oh, I'm so miserable. Like I'm a nurse, but I'm just not happy, and like I'm overweight and I just feel horrible. And so she's like, you know what? I'm going to do something about this. I'm going to, not only take time to like lose weight but I'm going to like help transform other people's lives. And she ended up opening up a business, like a nutrition like business surrounded by Herbalife. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of that, but I was just so inspired by that. She took took this like terrible event, and her life has never looked better. She's thriving. So like I want to continue to talk about, interview people on the podcast, and be able to share people's stories, because I think that a lot of wonderful things are happening with people, and they should deserve to have some type of platform to be able to share their ideas and their stories.
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea of um, a podcast and seeing and hearing other people's stories. I think that that could be a really big um, inspiration for others. Just kind of like you took inspiration from how your friend was doing their thing, and like I've no doubt that and I told you this during the process that even if one person reads
Mhm.
your book and that's the only person that reads your book and it makes an impact in their life, then you've succeeded in what you set out to do, because that one person has ripple effects for people that you'll never see or never get to meet. And that's what's so exciting, is that you had over 100 pre-sales beforehand, so
Mhm.
you've already surpassed the one.
That's true. But they haven't read it yet. No, I'm just joking. I no, you're absolutely right. I did not write this book to, you know, get rich or any, nothing. I just did it because it was just an expression of my heart and what I was feeling at the time. And if I can help someone, like you said, one person, um, and it's already helped one person, it's helped me, not
Yeah.
only grieve and mourn. And it was a very cathartic experience. It was pretty amazing how many stories I included in this book that I had no intention of including before. It just like things came up when I was rewriting it, and I'm like, yes, I want to include that, and I want to include that. I really wanted to uh, capture who my mother was, me, to not so people could be inspired by her, be inspired by the woman she was, because she was, an incredible woman. I hope to be, half the woman she was. She just she was a nurse, a mother, incredibly thoughtful woman, and I want people to be inspired by her too, 'cause she did a lot of things right. So, but yeah, yeah. So the podcast, and I'm actually going to launch the first one next week, and then I'm going to try to do it bi-monthly at first, and then see how I get into the groove of getting more people interested in wanting to be on it. So
Yeah.
anyone knows anyone, just contact me. I'd love to interview you about what's going on in your life and how you've been able to use your loss. And because even though I wrote this book, I'm absolutely not an expert in grief or mourning. I did it as a way to be inspired myself, and to like see what I can do in my life, to not only carry out my mother's memory, but do certain things that I, um, can do things and, change in my life. Because, there's a lot of things that I could be doing, that help me heal, but also help others heal too. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And Lex had the question of is her book available in the Philippines? I
Hmm.
don't know for sure. I don't know if
I,
you have an idea.
I, I'm not, I mean, thank you, Lex, for, your interest in the book. Um, I mean, if you have access to Amazon, I think, you can buy the book on Amazon. I think, I will be doing an audiobook, um, coming up soon. And then, but I'm not 100% sure. I mean, I can find out. I think that actually, now that I'm thinking about it, it is available on Ingram Spark. and I'm blanking on the other website, but it does ship to, outside the US. So, I mean, I can find out. I,
Well,
I
and
apologize.
it's also in ebook format, right?
It is. Mhm.
Yeah. So, so Lex, even if it's not even if it won't ship a hardback to the Philippines, you should be able to get the ebook version, if you have that available as an option to you. But yeah,
You can buy that on Amazon, and
yeah,
it's only $1 right now. So, but
yeah, I saw that. I was just like, oh snap.
yeah. Yes. So, but thank you for your interest in the book, Lex. I hope. Oh, wonderful. Okay.
Yeah, so I would check Lex to see if Amazon will ship there, and if not, um, I think Ingram also goes out to Kobo. That
Oh,
is,
Kobo. That's what it is.
yeah, and I think they do they're the biggest ebook distributor out there. But yeah, I do think you can do like drop ship from Ingram Spark. I think you just have to search for the book name and the title
Yeah.
on there, and then you can actually purchase it from there, and they'll ship it, drop ship it to anywhere, if I remember correctly. I
Mhm.
haven't dinked around too much with Ingram Spark, so my knowledge there is a bit fuzzy.
Same, unfortunately. But now I'm inspired, Lex, to look into that more. But if you have access to Amazon, great, because if you can buy it through Amazon.
Yeah. Um, so I firstly just want to thank you for being open and vulnerable in the book and sharing so much of your mother with, I mean, so many people, really. I think that just from what I had read, in the introduction where you talk about, like, why do we all wear black at a funeral? And, there were some of those questions that, to me was like, I don't know, why do we wear black at a funeral? Isn't that just kind of what we are supposed to do? And then you kind of dive into a brief history of like what grieving and grief and mourning has looked like for the past, what, 2000 years, and how
Yeah.
it's not really changed. And then diving into the that questioning of like, but does it have to be that way? Do we continue doing this? Because does it really help people to do it this way when it doesn't reflect because like celebration of life has become more popular than like your
Mhm.
standard funeral, because we realize that, like, they lived and they were happy, and they brought us happiness and they brought us joy. And shouldn't that reflect, their life? And I know that um you had mentioned at one point in the book where you guys did a big celebration of life, and you had like what, 200 plus people come out.
Yeah, we had about 100, which I was overwhelmed by. We did it the year on her 1 year death anniversary. Um, and we had this beautiful white tent and tables, and we ordered her favorite. She loved Italian food, so we ordered Italian food, and we planted flowers in her garden, and we did a walk. My mother loved to walk because I grew up on a Christmas tree farm, so she would do the lap around. And so we did her route, and we set lanterns up in the air, and it was just such a beautiful celebration. It was such an honor to be able to do that, and we had so many of her friends come, and my family, and her colleagues, and her nurse friends, and we were just so overwhelmed by the response to it. And the funny thing is, initially in the morning, it was really raining and icky out. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going to be terrible if it's raining. But then as soon as, it was 12 o'clock, we had people come. like the weather broke and it turned out to be like the most beautiful day, and I'll always remember that day. It was such a wonderful, wonderful event, and I know that my mother helped break the weather.
Yeah, just like shoot.
Yeah,
No.
yeah, get out of here.
Hey, ain't nobody got time for clouds.
I know. So, but yeah. I mean, I just want to mention this book is not a history book. I
Right.
very lightly talk about a statistic that I found to be so strange. I mean, a lot of our civilization has been inspired by the Romans and the Roman Empire. They ruled the world for 1,000 years. So but they did a lot of good for us. A lot of what we use today is from the Romans. But I was just so shocked that, they wore these dark colored togas, as a sign of mourning, and they didn't laugh or they didn't go out and see people for months on end. And that might have worked for them, but I was just so shocked that we kind of, even though we might not wear black every day, but I feel like our emotions reflect that. And it's kind of against the grain if we're out living our lives again after we've lost someone. There's a lot of things that we have to address. Why do we do certain things? Like society puts all these expectations on us, but we have to look deep into ourselves and ask why, and why are we allowing society to do that? I wore a ruby red dress to my mother's viewing, and I wore like an emerald green dress to her funeral. I didn't, to me, wearing black didn't represent my mother. I just wanted to wear bright colors. And people, even after the fact, I found out people were like, why, question my decision to do that. I was not, I didn't care. To me, my mother was this bright, beautiful soul that, to me, black didn't cut it. So I just felt, early on that I chose specifically not to wear black, because to me, she was this vibrant, beautiful person, and her smile could light up a room. So I thought black just wasn't right. So
Yeah. Well, and I remember reading over that part where you talked about the emerald green dress, and it was like bright pink pumps or something like that.
yes.
And
Mhm.
I was just like, that is very different than what I was expecting. And but it was reflected, like the more that you went out and the more that we got to know each other, because that was fairly early on when I read that, the more it fit your personality. And I was just like, that totally makes sense. And one of the other beautiful things about the book is that there is wonderful humor layered throughout, and some majestic puns that I hope are still in there because they were so fantastic.
Thank you. I did dial back some of that, but there are a few puns scattered through it because I love puns, and and thank you for saying that. My mother was a very goofy, humorous person, and I think I got a lot of that from her. So a lot of it's still in there, but I try to dial some of it back because some of it was a bit distracting. So I wanted to make sure that the core of the message was there. But yeah, I mean, I still have fun in this book. There's some funny things, very funny stories that I share about her and my life with her. And I hope you will enjoy it, because
Yeah.
the point of the matter is I want this book to be a source of happiness and joy, and a source of hope. And there are, and I hope that you laugh at some of the things I share, not only about me, but about, other people. And, but not in a disrespectful way, but, there are funny parts of the book, and not every single chapter is, super funny, but, there are funny things. And to me, I think we take ourselves way too seriously sometimes, and especially when it comes to grief. And I think just laughing at ourselves and laughing at, our days, it can make a huge difference. The other day I literally fell up the steps, like carrying things and up the steps. And my initial reaction was to laugh, So I laughed and I felt better. I mean, it hurt like heck, but but I couldn't. I like looked around, like no one's looking at me, and I just started laughing. I'm like, this is ridiculous. I just literally fell up the steps.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I've definitely had that happen to me more than
Yes.
once. Yeah. Hey Heather, welcome. She's saying she's always been interested in this subject, and I mean, it is one of those things where, again, going back to
Hi Heather, thank you.
people don't really talk about,
No.
people don't talk about it.
It's easier not to talk about it. It's
Yeah.
easier to suppress it. It's easier to say I'm fine. It's easier to say, yeah, I'm okay, and just and hold it in. That's where the grief comes from. We bottle up our grief, and then all of a sudden we just kind of like burst because we're just so we keep it in, and that's where I found that it's so much better to take a moment and realize where you are in your journey, and you know take a moment to say, am I bottling this in? And if I am, like, how can I take action into showing it outwardly, but not in like a public forum type way. Just like, how can I use these emotions and use it for good today?
Yeah, and I think that's a beautiful way to think about it too, is taking that, and again, kind of going back to earlier in the stream, it's not a matter of you having to be out in the streets weeping and wailing. It's
Right.
just choosing to be open, or at least a little bit more open than
Mhm.
what kind of society tells us, or influences us to be. um and Lex in the Philippines, wearing
Mhm.
black in the funeral is a taboo. We usually wear white, which is interesting. I never knew
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
uh,
that is, see, I would prefer white, and thank you, Lex, for sharing that. I think that's, beautiful. It's their entrance into, the kingdom of God, or, whatever you believe, it's their afterlife, and, it's a new beginning. And I think white is a wonderful expression of, you know, um, being able to be respectful to them. And, thank you for sharing that. It's beautiful. To me, I think white is personally is a better representation than black.
yeah,
Um, it's a much more hopeful and beautiful way of not only being respectful, but representing the person and their new beginning
yeah,
as a soul.
yeah. And Heather says, colors are interesting, traditions regarding funerals, other life events, stuff like that. And
Yeah,
yeah,
and I think there's a lot of beautiful things when it comes to traditions. But I think that even in death, we can create new traditions. I mean, I every year around my mother's 1 year death anniversary, I want to do something, showing my mourning outwardly. The first year I did, my family and I hosted a beautiful life celebration event. This past year I did the unveiling of my book, for her. And, I have no idea what next year will bring, but, my mother is an integral part of my life still. And I think creating new traditions is also can be a beautiful thing.
yeah, absolutely. And not being beholden to um a particular way of doing it just because that's simply how it's been done.
Right.
Choosing to go and do something where it's a celebration with friends and family, or hundreds of people that were influenced, to have it be really a celebration of the person and what they meant to everybody versus just, a more sad and somber event. It's like they brought us joy. We should reflect that in the way that we talk. And I think that's why the celebration of life has kind of caught on in many ways, is because people are tired of the dreariness of a funeral. They want to express their joy for their loved ones in a way that is respectful to that person.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, and we can do things not only, on specific dates, but just every day, just even if it's something as simple as, singing a song every morning that reminds you of your lost loved one, you feeling connected to them. There's something really beautiful in that. It's you're not holding it in like you're not holding in your sadness, but you're showing it outwardly to yourself. you know and even in the Bible, God says, blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are those who take the time to show outwardly how much they are, miss their loved one, but that they're doing it in a way that helps them get out of their sadness and get out of themselves, which I find very beautiful too.
Yeah. And once Alexa's comment pops up here, there it goes. In my mom's death anniversary, we honor her by playing her favorite songs, cooking her favorite food, and celebrate. And I think that's a beautiful way to do it. It keeps your mom's memory alive. It's and it's doing all the things that made her happy, eating her favorite foods, her favorite music, all that kind of stuff. It's a beautiful way to honor their memory.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And thank you for sharing that, Lex. I'm sure your mother is, praising you and being there, and she's right there with you. I know it. I know it. And I'm sure she, misses you terribly. But being able to share in her favorite things, I know is very healing process. And I'm so glad that you're able to share that with us, because I did a lot of the same things, and still to this day, and I really love it. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. And then Heather, I lived for a time in near New Orleans. I know about those jazz funerals, if that's the right term. That sounds like a party.
Yeah, I mean, New Orleans knows how to party, and I'm sure it sounds fantastic, whatever it is. I hope someone has a jazz funeral for me when I die. That sounds amazing.
Yeah. When I go, I want to be wearing this shirt and having AC/DC blasting Back in Black in the background, like because black is just my color. I've themed the entire business and everything around me in this black shirt.
Yes.
So,
It's whatever works for you. If you feel like you and the most alive wearing black, then do it. But, for me, I didn't want to do it as a representation of mourning my mother's death.
absolutely.
So
Yeah.
that's just how I viewed it. No, trust me, I still like the color black. But I just didn't want to use it as a symbol.
Absolutely. Yeah. And parades are included in the jazz funerals. I'd be fine with the parade.
I love parades. I think parades are underrated. I am 33 and I still love the 4th of July parade.
Yeah.
I love parades. It's just so exciting and lively.
Yeah. So much fun. Yeah.
Yeah,
They
I agree.
unfortunately canceled pretty much everything out where I live.
Yeah, same here.
Yes. Thunderstruck. That's another good one. You can't go wrong. I'll probably have like an AC/DC compilation.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Heather says that all her family loves parades as well.
Oh, nice.
They're just fun. They're just
I know, right?
Kids have fun. Parents have fun. Kids get candy. Parents hate the fact that kids get candy.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I love muscle cars, so I love the, you know, old guys driving their muscle car, showing them off, and and like, we yell to them like, rev your engine, and then they rev it, and I'm like, just so cool.
It is so much fun listening to some of those, just the growl at some of those things.
Yes, I know. It's fuel to
Like,
my soul. I love muscle cars, so that's
yeah, those are good stuff.
Mhm.
Well, guys, I appreciate all of you who have been able to join in the stream. And for those
Yes,
of
thank
you
you.
who are coming after and will be seeing this on the replay, again, if you guys want to connect with Jen, I will be posting a link down to the Facebook, her Facebook profile, after the stream ends. If you guys want to support her more with her book and get her book out there, the link to her book is actually down in the show notes. I highly recommend that you guys go and purchase it. Right now, it's actually $1. I don't know how long that will
Yeah, the
be.
Kindle version is $1.
Kindle version's $1. Okay, so
Yes, like
Kindle.
the Kindle version's $1. The hard copy, the paperback, I think is $18. But yeah.
Okay, so if you guys, so either way, you guys should go and buy the book. Buy it twice if you want, because it's $1. I mean, you can't go wrong with $1. And then in addition to that, take into consideration, a lot of people are going to be in a time of grief and mourning. It's kind of the season we are in, unfortunately. And I recommend that you buy it not only to support Jen and the message that she has to reach people, but really to help you help someone else who's going to need it, because there is going to be somebody at some point that who loses a loved one, and whether it's from the current circumstances or just old age or accidents, someone is going to lose a loved one, and you can do something about it by helping educate yourself on different creative ways, and also to just for yourself learn how to better grieve maybe the things that you have lost, whether it's been a loss of a loved one, a sibling, family, friends. This book really is fantastic in kind of giving you strategies that they're unconventional, and what makes it so fantastic is because it's not a cookie cutter like the 5 steps to grieving. It is how to live a life of joy in the midst of it and continue on after. So highly recommend that you guys go down and check that out. Jen, any closing thoughts from you to the audience?
Sure. Well, thank you all so much for joining me today with Stephen. It's been such a wonderful hour with you, and being able to talk about the experience. And if I can provide any type of help to you on your mourning journey, it would be an honor to be able to work with you in some way. We can connect, on Facebook or wherever, and you could be a guest on my up and coming podcast, and being able to share any stories you'd like to share. It's been a wonderful last year writing this book, and but it's I'm just beginning. I'm just beginning this mourning journey. And I'm always looking to be inspired, and I hope that I can be a source of inspiration and hope for people. That's my goal, is to be able to be a light of some kind, some type of beacon for people to know that there's more to mourning a loss than just doing what we've been taught. I found that it's the first couple years, you still have a decent support system, but it's like the third year and fourth year where you still want to be connected with your loved one, but your support system seems to be dissipating. You often have to look to yourself to find, that source of healing and hope and joy. And that's why I wrote this book. Like, I'm sure I'm going to have to go back and reread some of it too, because, you constantly need to be reminded that, you are so much more powerful than you give yourself credit for. But sometimes you do need an extra hand, some ideas of inspiration to keep yourself going. And, that's why I wrote this book, to give people that beacon of hope, when they need it the most, so.
Absolutely. I love that. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining. And actually, I will be going live with another author interview with a client, a former student of mine who also got their published book. Their name is also Jennifer, and we're going to be talking about her book.
Is it Jen Garman?
Yes.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, I'll be doing an interview with her here at 10:30. So
Awesome.
guys, keep an eye out, and thank you guys again so much for joining.
Yes,
And
thank you.
we'll see you guys later.
Thanks, Stephen. Bye, everyone.